Sometimes the hardest part of losing everything is finding a place to sleep where no one will notice. The glass had fogged over from her breath again. Olivia Hayes rubbed a small circle clear with the sleeve of her worn sweater, just enough to see the dim parking lot lights flickering above. It was 38 degrees outside, colder than she expected for early November, and the inside of her car wasn't much better. The old sedan creaked with every gust of wind, the metal frame ticking softly as it settled into the night. In the back seat, her 6-year-old son, Noah, shifted under a pile of mismatched blankets, his small body curled toward the door for warmth. Olivia reached back without looking, her fingers brushing his hair, counting his breaths the way she had learned to do on nights when anxiety wouldn't let her sleep. 1, 2, 3, steady. That was all that mattered. She exhaled slowly, her chest tightening anyway. The front seat was pushed as far back as it would go, but it still wasn't enough. Her knees ached. Her neck throbbed. She hadn't slept properly in 3 nights, not since the motel money ran out and the last option disappeared with it. Just one more night, she whispered, barely audible even to herself. We'll figure it out in the morning. The words felt thin. Promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Across the lot, a black SUV idled for a moment longer than necessary. Inside, Ethan Cole rested his hands on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the faint outline of the old sedan tucked between 2 flickering light posts. He had noticed it when he first pulled in, out of place, like something the world had forgotten to move. Now he noticed the movement inside. A shadow shifting. A hand reaching back. He frowned slightly, the quiet hum of the engine filling the silence around him. He had seen things like this before. Not often. But enough to recognize it. Still, he didn't move. The dashboard clock read 11:42 p.m. His phone buzzed once in the cup holder, another message about a meeting, a contract, something that usually demanded his attention. Tonight, it didn't. Instead, his gaze stayed fixed on the car across the lot. The windows were fogged from the inside. That detail stayed with him. People didn't fog up windows unless they were inside, for a while. A long while. He leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. This wasn't his problem. It was a thought that came easily, practiced, almost automatic. And yet, he didn't put the car in drive. In the sedan, Olivia pulled her coat tighter around her chest, trying to ignore the way the cold crept through every seam. Her stomach tightened with a dull, familiar ache. She hadn't eaten since noon, and even then it had been half a sandwich she split with Noah. She glanced down at her phone. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing had changed. Nothing was coming. She turned it face down again. Outside, a pair of headlights swept briefly across her windshield, then disappeared. She flinched anyway, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. It was getting harder to relax. Harder to pretend this was temporary. Her gaze drifted to the rearview mirror, catching the faint outline of her son again. For a moment, the fear softened into something else. Determination. Quiet, stubborn, refusing to break. You're okay, she whispered, more firmly this time. I've got you. Across the lot, Ethan finally shifted, his fingers tightening slightly on the wheel. He watched as the interior of the sedan went still again, the faint movement fading into silence. For a long second, he considered stepping out. Just to check. Just to make sure. But something held him back. Not indifference. Not exactly. More like hesitation. Boundaries. The kind you don't cross without reason. So instead, he did the unexpected. He put the car in drive. The SUV rolled slowly past the sedan, close enough for him to catch a clearer glimpse through the fogged glass. Just shapes. A woman. A child. That was enough. He didn't stop. Didn't roll the window down. Didn't say a word. But as he drove out of the parking lot and into the empty street beyond, the image stayed with him. Long after the car disappeared from view. And long after he should have forgotten it. The morning light came slowly, thin and pale through the fogged glass, turning the inside of the car into a dull gray box. Olivia Hayes woke before she opened her eyes, her body stiff and aching, her breath shallow from the cold that had settled deep into her bones overnight. For a moment, she did not move. She just listened. The distant hum of early traffic. A shopping cart rattling somewhere across the lot. And behind her, the soft, uneven breathing of her son. She turned carefully, her joints protesting, and looked back. Noah was still asleep, his small face half buried in the blanket, his cheeks flushed from the cold. One of his hands had slipped out, resting against the seat, fingers curled as if holding on to something invisible. Olivia reached back and gently tucked the blanket around him again, her movements slow, deliberate, like any sudden motion might break the fragile calm of the morning. "We made it," she whispered under her breath, though she was not sure what they had made it through. The night. The fear. Or just another step deeper into something she could not yet name. Her stomach tightened again, sharper now. Hunger had a way of waking up faster than anything else. She glanced toward the front passenger seat, where her purse sat half open. Inside, she already knew what she would find. A few crumpled receipts. A nearly empty water bottle. No cash. No answers. She let out a quiet breath and reached for the door handle, pushing it open just enough to let the cold morning air rush in. It hit her face immediately, sharp and unforgiving, but it helped clear the fog in her head. She stepped out carefully, stretching her back as the stiffness protested. The parking lot looked different in daylight. Less forgiving. More exposed. Cars came and went now, people walking with purpose, coffee cups in hand, conversations already started. No one looked at her directly, but she could feel it anyway. The awareness. The silent judgment that never needed words. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and turned back toward the car, planning the next step without really having one. That was when she saw it. A small brown paper bag sat on the hood of her car, weighed down by a folded napkin. Olivia froze, her mind taking a second longer than it should have to understand what she was looking at. The bag had not been there last night. She knew that with absolute certainty. Her first instinct was not relief. It was caution. She glanced around quickly, scanning the lot, the passing cars, the people walking by. No one seemed to be paying attention. No one was watching her. Slowly, she stepped closer. The bag was still warm when she touched it. That detail sent a strange wave through her chest, something between confusion and disbelief. She hesitated, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the paper, as if it might disappear if she moved too quickly. Then she lifted it. Inside, neatly arranged, was more food than she had expected. 2 breakfast sandwiches, still wrapped. A carton of milk. A small container of cut fruit. And tucked carefully along the side, a bottle of children's cough syrup. Olivia blinked, her breath catching slightly. That last item did not belong to chance. That was not random. Someone had noticed. Not just her. Noah. Her grip tightened slightly on the bag as her eyes moved to the napkin folded on top. There was writing on it. Simple. Clean. Not rushed. She unfolded it slowly, her fingers trembling despite herself. For the little fighter. Stay warm. Olivia stared at the words for a long second, her mind struggling to catch up with the quiet weight of them. Not pity. Not charity thrown without thought. Something else. Something intentional. Behind her, Noah stirred, his voice small and groggy as it reached her through the open door. Mom? She turned immediately, her expression shifting, softening, the confusion tucked away behind something steadier. I am right here, she said, her voice gentle, steady in a way she did not fully feel. She held the bag a little closer without realizing it, as if it might anchor her in place. And for the first time in days, the morning did not feel entirely empty. Noah sat up slowly in the back seat, his hair sticking up in uneven directions, his eyes still heavy with sleep but already searching for her. Olivia Hayes turned fully toward him, forcing a small smile that felt steadier than the storm inside her chest. "Hey," she said softly, holding up the paper bag just enough for him to see. "Looks like we got lucky this morning." Noah blinked, his gaze shifting from her face to the bag, curiosity slowly replacing the fog of sleep. "Is that food?" he asked, his voice quiet, careful, like he did not want to assume too much. Olivia nodded once, moving around the car and opening the back door. The cold air rushed in again, but this time it did not feel quite as sharp. She reached in and helped him sit up straighter, pulling the blanket around his shoulders like a makeshift coat. "It is," she said, her tone light but grounded. "Breakfast." Noah looked down at the bag again, then back at her. "Did you buy it?" The question landed softly, but it carried weight. Olivia hesitated for just a fraction of a second, then shook her head gently. "No," she answered honestly. "Someone left it for us." Noah's eyebrows pulled together slightly, confusion flickering across his face. "Like, a gift?" Olivia exhaled slowly, the words settling into place in a way she had not allowed herself to think yet. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Like a gift." She reached into the bag and pulled out one of the wrapped sandwiches, handing it to him first without thinking. Noah took it carefully, like it might disappear if he moved too fast. He peeled back the wrapper slowly, the smell of warm bread and eggs rising into the cold air between them. His eyes widened just a little. "It is still warm," he said, almost surprised. Olivia noticed the same thing again, that quiet detail pressing against her thoughts. Warm meant recent. Recent meant someone had been here not long ago. Someone had seen them. She glanced up again, scanning the lot without making it obvious, her instincts still alert beneath the surface. Cars moved in and out. A man walked past talking on his phone. A woman loaded groceries into her trunk. Life continued like normal. But for her, something had shifted. She looked back at Noah, who had already taken a small bite, his shoulders relaxing in a way she had not seen in days. That alone made something tighten in her chest, not from fear this time, but from something closer to relief. She reached back into the bag and pulled out the carton of milk, opening it and handing it to him. "Drink some of this too," she said gently. Slowly. Noah nodded, doing exactly as she said, his movements careful, almost grateful without fully understanding why. Olivia took the second sandwich for herself but did not eat right away. Instead, she held it in her hands, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers, grounding her in the moment. Her eyes drifted again to the napkin folded beside her on the hood. The words replayed in her mind without asking permission. "For the little fighter. Stay warm." It was not just the message. It was the way it had been written. Steady. Intentional. Not rushed. Not careless. Whoever had left this had taken their time. Had thought about it. Had seen more than just a car in a parking lot. "Mom," Noah said softly, pulling her attention back. "Do you think they know us?" Olivia met his eyes, the question cutting deeper than he probably realized. She shook her head slowly. "I do not think so," she answered, her voice calm but thoughtful. "I think they just saw us." Noah considered that for a moment, then nodded as if that explanation made sense to him. Kids had a way of accepting things adults overcomplicated. Olivia finally took a small bite of her own sandwich, the taste simple but overwhelming after hours of emptiness. She closed her eyes for a brief second, letting the warmth settle, letting herself feel it fully. Not just the food. The moment. The fact that someone, somewhere, had chosen to care without asking for anything in return. And for the first time since the night before, the question in her mind shifted. Not why this happened. But who had done it? And why it felt like it mattered more than it should. The parking lot had grown louder as the morning moved forward, engines starting, doors slamming, voices rising and fading in passing waves, but inside the small space around Olivia Hayes and her son, there was a strange kind of quiet that did not match the world around them. Noah finished the last bite of his sandwich slowly, as if he wanted to make it last, his small fingers carefully folding the wrapper when he was done. Olivia watched him for a moment, memorizing the way his shoulders had relaxed, the way his breathing had steadied, the way something as simple as a warm meal had shifted his entire mood. It should not have mattered this much, but it did. It always did. She took another small bite of her own sandwich, more out of necessity than hunger now, her mind already moving ahead to what came next. Food was one problem. It had been solved, at least for the moment. But everything else still stood in front of her, unchanged. She wiped her hands on the napkin, folding it again carefully instead of throwing it away, then placed it inside her purse without thinking. Something about it felt important. Not because of the words alone, but because it was proof that someone had seen them and chosen kindness anyway. That kind of proof was rare. "Mom," Noah said again, his voice softer now, more awake, more aware. "Are we going to stay here today?" The question settled between them, simple and direct, but heavy with everything it carried. Olivia did not answer right away. She looked out across the lot again, watching people move with purpose, each one heading somewhere that made sense, somewhere they belonged. Then she looked back at her car. At the blankets. At the small space that had become their shelter. "Not all day," she said finally, her tone gentle but firm. "We are going to find somewhere better." Noah nodded slowly, trusting her in the way only a child could, without needing details or guarantees. Olivia reached out and brushed a hand lightly over his shoulder. "Finish your milk," she added softly. "We have a little bit of a plan." The truth was, she did not. Not a real one. But saying it out loud made it feel closer to something she could build. She stepped away from the car for a moment, letting Noah sit inside where it was slightly warmer, and pulled her phone from her pocket. The screen lit up, bright against the daylight, and for a second she hesitated before opening her email. There were a few unread messages. Rejections. Silence disguised as polite responses. Nothing new. Nothing helpful. She swallowed that disappointment quickly, not letting it settle, and instead opened the map application. Nearby listings appeared: shelters, community centers, places she had already considered and, in some cases, already tried. Each one came with its own limits, its own waiting lists, its own quiet barriers. She scrolled anyway, her thumb moving slowly, her eyes searching for something she might have missed. Something different. Behind her, a car door closed a little too loudly, making her glance up instinctively. A black SUV rolled into the far side of the lot, moving slower than the others, deliberate in a way that stood out if you were paying attention. Olivia's gaze lingered for a second longer than necessary, a flicker of recognition brushing against her thoughts without fully forming. She had seen that car before. She was almost certain of it. But the moment passed as quickly as it came, and she looked back down at her phone, forcing her focus back to what mattered. Inside the SUV, Ethan Cole rested one hand on the wheel, his eyes scanning the lot until they landed on the same old sedan. It was still there. So were they. He let out a slow breath, something tight in his chest loosening just slightly at the sight of the boy sitting upright now, a carton of milk in his hands. They had found the food. That much was clear. He watched for a moment longer, careful not to draw attention, his presence just another shadow among many. He had not planned to come back. Not really. But something about the way he had left the night before had not sat right with him. It had felt unfinished. Incomplete. Now, as he sat there again, watching from a distance, he realized that it still did. Across the lot, Olivia shifted her weight slightly, her phone still in her hand, her thoughts moving faster than her surroundings. She did not see him. Not yet. But something in the air had changed, subtle and almost impossible to name. And for the first time since the morning began, the feeling that someone was still watching over them had not disappeared. It had only grown quieter, steadier, waiting for the moment it would matter again. Olivia Hayes slipped her phone back into her coat pocket, her fingers lingering for a moment as if holding onto it might somehow produce a better answer the second time around, but the screen had already gone dark, and with it, the fragile hope that something new would appear if she just looked long enough. She exhaled slowly and turned back toward the car, where Noah now sat with his legs crossed, the empty milk carton balanced carefully beside him like it still mattered. He looked up the moment he saw her, his expression searching her face for something he could trust. "What is the plan?" he asked, his voice steady but quiet, as if he already knew the answer might not be simple. Olivia paused for half a second, just enough to gather herself, then gave a small nod. "We are going to check one more place," she said, her tone calm, measured. "There is a community center about 2 miles from here. They might have resources. Maybe a warm space for the day." Noah nodded again, accepting that as enough, because it always had to be enough. Olivia reached into the car and began folding the blankets, her movements efficient, practiced, as if this routine had already started to become something familiar. Each fold felt like a quiet acknowledgement of where they were, but also a refusal to stay there longer than necessary. As she worked, her mind stayed active, calculating distance, gas, time, everything that could go wrong and everything that might go right if she moved quickly enough. Across the lot, Ethan Cole watched the small scene unfold with a focus that had nothing to do with business or obligation. He noticed the way she moved, deliberate, controlled, never wasting energy, even in exhaustion. He noticed the boy watching her, trusting her without question. And he noticed something else that lingered beneath the surface. She was not waiting to be saved. She was trying to move forward. That detail mattered more than he expected. His fingers tapped lightly against the steering wheel once, twice, a habit he had not broken in years. He had seen people in difficult situations before, had written checks, funded programs, built entire initiatives around helping from a distance. But this was different. This was not a statistic or a project. This was a moment happening in real time, 10 yards away from him, and for the first time in a long while, distance felt like the wrong approach. He glanced down at the passenger seat, where his phone rested beside a leather folder filled with schedules, meetings, responsibilities that usually dictated every hour of his day. He could leave. He should leave. That was the logical choice. Instead, he turned the engine off. The quiet that followed felt louder than the noise before it. Olivia closed the trunk after placing the last of their things inside, then opened the driver's side door, pausing briefly as she looked back at the spot on the hood where the paper bag had been. The surface was empty now, but the feeling it left behind had not faded. She reached into her purse again and touched the folded napkin, just to make sure it was still there. It was. She nodded to herself once, as if confirming something she could not yet put into words, then slid into the driver's seat. The engine turned over with a tired sound, but it started. That was enough. She adjusted the rearview mirror, catching Noah's eyes for a brief second. "Seatbelt," she reminded him gently. He clicked it into place without hesitation. As she shifted the car into drive, a movement to her left caught her attention. The black SUV. It was closer now than it had been before. Close enough that she could see the outline of the driver through the windshield. For a brief moment, their eyes almost met. Almost. Olivia looked away first, her instincts tightening quietly beneath her calm expression. She had learned not to assume anything about strangers. Not their intentions. Not their reasons. But something about the way that vehicle had remained, had returned, settled into her thoughts without permission. She pulled out slowly, guiding the car toward the exit, her focus forward, her grip steady on the wheel. Behind her, Ethan watched as the sedan moved past him, the distance between them shrinking for just a second before growing again. He did not move immediately. He simply sat there, his gaze following the path of the car as it approached the edge of the lot. Then, without fully deciding to, he reached for the ignition and started the engine again. Not to follow. Not exactly. But not to leave either. Because something told him that whatever came next was not finished yet. The sedan merged slowly into the morning traffic, its engine humming with a fragile determination that matched the woman behind the wheel. Olivia Hayes kept both hands steady at 10 and 2, her eyes moving between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, where Noah sat quietly, watching the world pass by with a kind of silent curiosity. The city felt different in motion. Less exposing than the parking lot. Less still. Here, everything moved forward, and for a moment, that illusion was enough to make her believe they could too. "Are we close?" Noah asked after a few minutes, his voice softer now, calmer after the food, after the warmth that had settled into him. Olivia glanced at the map on her phone mounted against the dashboard. "About 10 minutes, she said gently. "Maybe a little less if the lights stay green." He nodded, accepting that answer, then turned his attention to the passing buildings, his small hand resting against the window as if he could hold on to something outside. Olivia's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel as a thought crossed her mind uninvited. 10 minutes. 10 minutes until another door that might not open. She pushed the thought aside quickly. Not yet. Not before they tried. Behind them, at a careful distance that did not draw attention, a black SUV moved through the same flow of traffic. Ethan Cole kept his speed consistent, his presence blending in with the rest of the morning commuters, but his focus remained fixed ahead. He had not planned to follow them. Not consciously. But when the sedan had pulled out of the lot, something had shifted in him before logic had a chance to intervene. Now, as he drove several car lengths behind, he told himself it was just to make sure they were safe. Just to see where they were going. Nothing more. Yet his eyes rarely left that aging vehicle in front of him. He noticed the slight hesitation at stop signs. The careful acceleration. The way the car stayed within the right lane, as if avoiding unnecessary risks. She was not careless. She was calculating every move. That detail stayed with him. Olivia slowed as the navigation voice directed her toward a side street lined with older buildings, the kind that carried quiet signs of wear but still held purpose. A small sign appeared ahead, mounted slightly crooked on a brick wall. Community Outreach Center. She felt something tighten in her chest again, a mix of hope and caution that had become all too familiar. "That is it," she said softly. Noah leaned forward slightly in his seat, trying to see past her shoulder. "It looks nice," he offered, his voice hopeful in a way that made her throat tighten. Olivia pulled into the small parking area beside the building, noticing immediately that it was already partially full. That could mean two things. Demand. Or help. She turned off the engine and sat still for a second longer than necessary, her hands resting on the wheel as if she needed to gather something before stepping out. "Okay," she said quietly, more to herself than to Noah. "Let us go see." She stepped out of the car, the air here slightly warmer, or maybe it just felt that way because she wanted it to. Noah followed quickly, staying close to her side as they walked toward the entrance. The door opened before they could reach for it, a woman in her 50s stepping out with a clipboard in hand. Her expression was kind, but tired in a way that suggested she had seen many mornings like this one. "Good morning," the woman said gently, her eyes moving between Olivia and Noah with quiet understanding. "Are you here for assistance?" Olivia nodded once, her voice steady despite the weight behind it. "Yes. We were hoping," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "We were hoping there might be space. Or resources." The woman's expression softened further, but there was a hesitation that followed, small but unmistakable. "We do what we can," she said slowly. "But I want to be honest with you. We are very full right now." The words landed softly, but they carried the same familiar weight Olivia had heard too many times. Not rejection. Not exactly. But not the answer she needed either. Behind them, a black SUV pulled quietly into a space across the street, the engine cutting off as Ethan Cole stepped out, his gaze already fixed on the entrance where Olivia stood. He did not approach. Not yet. He simply watched as the moment unfolded, something inside him tightening as he saw the slight shift in her posture, the way her shoulders straightened just a little more, as if preparing to carry the answer no matter what it was. And for the first time since he had noticed her, he realized that watching from a distance might not be enough anymore. Olivia Hayes felt the familiar weight settle into her chest, the kind that did not knock you down all at once but pressed slowly, steadily, until breathing itself felt like work. She nodded anyway, her expression composed, her voice calm in a way she had learned to perfect. "I understand," she said gently, even though part of her wanted to ask how long, how full, how much longer before there was space for people like them. The woman with the clipboard gave a small, sympathetic smile, glancing down at her notes before looking back up. "We can still put your name on a list," she offered. "And there are a few daytime resources inside. Warm space, restrooms, a small pantry. It is not much, but it is something." Olivia nodded again, this time with more intention. Something was better than nothing. It always had to be. "Thank you," she said quietly. Noah stayed close to her side, his small hand brushing against her coat as if making sure she was still there. He looked up at her, searching her face again, reading more than she wanted him to. "We can stay for a little, right?" he asked. Olivia met his eyes and gave a soft nod. "Yes," she said. "We can stay for a little." The woman stepped aside, holding the door open for them, and as Olivia guided Noah inside, a wave of warm air met them, carrying the faint smell of coffee and something simple cooking in the distance. The contrast to the cold outside was immediate, almost overwhelming. Noah let out a small breath, the kind that carried relief without words, and Olivia felt her shoulders drop just a fraction, the tension easing in a way she had not expected. Inside, the space was modest but alive. Folding chairs lined the walls. A few families sat quietly, some talking in low voices, others simply resting. Volunteers moved between tables, offering cups, handing out small items, doing what they could with what they had. It was not perfect. It was not permanent. But it was human. Olivia signed her name on the clipboard, her handwriting steady despite everything, then guided Noah toward an empty pair of chairs near the corner. "Sit," she said gently. "Rest for a bit." Noah obeyed without hesitation, his body already leaning into the warmth, his eyes drifting around the room with quiet curiosity. Olivia remained standing for a moment longer, her gaze moving across the space, taking it in, measuring it, as if trying to understand how long they could stay, how much this place could hold before it reached its limit too. Outside, across the street, Ethan Cole stood beside his SUV, his hands resting loosely at his sides, his attention fixed on the entrance of the building. He had watched them go inside, had seen the brief hesitation, the acceptance that followed. He knew that look. It was not defeat. It was endurance. The kind that kept moving even when the path was uncertain. He exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping for a moment to the pavement beneath his feet before lifting again. He could leave now. He had confirmed they were safe, at least for the moment. That had been the reason, he told himself. But his feet did not move. Instead, his eyes shifted to the sign above the door, then back to the entrance, as if something unseen was holding him in place. Inside, Olivia finally sat down beside Noah, her hands resting loosely in her lap as she allowed herself a moment to simply be still. The warmth wrapped around her, soft but unfamiliar, like something she had forgotten she needed. Noah leaned slightly against her arm, his head resting just enough to remind her he was there, safe, present. She closed her eyes for a brief second, not to sleep, but to hold on to the moment before it slipped away. Because she knew it would. These spaces were temporary. These moments were borrowed. But as she opened her eyes again and looked around the room, she realized something had shifted, just slightly, just enough to matter. They were not invisible here. And sometimes, that was the first step toward something more. The warmth of the room settled deeper as the minutes passed, not just against Olivia Hayes's skin but somewhere quieter, somewhere harder to reach, the place where exhaustion had been sitting for too long. She watched Noah from the corner of her eye as he leaned forward slightly, his attention caught by a volunteer handing out small cups of hot chocolate to a group of children across the room. His eyes followed the tray, hopeful but hesitant, the way he had learned to be. Olivia noticed immediately. She always did. Before she could say anything, one of the volunteers approached them, a woman with soft gray hair and a gentle smile that did not feel forced. "Would you like something warm to drink?" she asked, her voice low and kind. Noah glanced up at Olivia first, waiting for permission without needing to ask. Olivia nodded once. "Yes, thank you," she said quietly. The woman handed Noah a small cup, steam rising into the air, and placed another one in Olivia's hands before moving on to the next family. Noah wrapped both hands around the cup, his fingers small against the paper, and took a careful sip. His shoulders relaxed almost instantly, a small smile forming at the edges of his lips. Olivia watched that moment closely, memorizing it without meaning to. Small things. They mattered more now than they ever had before. She lifted her own cup, the heat seeping into her palms, grounding her again. Across the room, a television played softly, muted images flickering without sound. A clock ticked steadily above it, marking time in a way that felt both too fast and too slow at once. Olivia's eyes drifted toward it, calculating without thinking. How long they could stay? How long before they had to move again? Her mind did not rest, even here. Outside, Ethan Cole finally moved. The hesitation that had held him in place for the past several minutes shifted into something else, something quieter but more certain. He crossed the street at an unhurried pace, his hands slipping into the pockets of his coat, his expression calm, composed, the way it always was when he stepped into a new space. But this time it was different. There was no assistant ahead of him, no scheduled meeting waiting behind a closed door. Just a decision he had not planned to make. He reached the entrance and paused briefly, his gaze flicking through the glass, catching a glimpse of the room inside. Families. Volunteers. And near the corner, the same woman and child he had seen the night before. Still there. Still moving forward. He pushed the door open quietly and stepped inside. The warmth met him immediately, along with the low hum of voices and the faint scent of coffee. No one paid him much attention at first. He was just another person walking in. And for a moment, that anonymity felt unfamiliar. He scanned the room once, his eyes finding Olivia almost without effort. She was sitting beside her son, her posture composed but alert, her attention divided between resting and staying ready. Ethan hesitated again, but this time it was shorter, lighter. Then he moved. Olivia sensed the shift before she saw it. Not a sound. Not a movement she could name. Just a subtle awareness that someone had entered her space. Her gaze lifted, scanning instinctively, and for the first time, it landed directly on him. The man from the SUV. The recognition was quiet but immediate, like a piece of a puzzle finally settling into place. Her grip tightened slightly around the cup in her hands, not from fear, but from something she could not yet define. Curiosity. Caution. Something in between. Ethan slowed as he approached, stopping at a respectful distance, giving her space without making it feel like distance. His expression remained calm, his voice when he spoke low and steady. "Good morning," he said simply. No introduction. No explanation. Just presence. Olivia held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, measuring him the way she had learned to measure everything. Then she nodded once. "Good morning," she replied, her tone even, controlled. Noah looked between them, his curiosity immediate, unfiltered. Ethan's eyes shifted briefly to the boy, a faint warmth softening his expression. "How is the breakfast?" he asked, his voice gentle, as if the question itself carried more meaning than it seemed. Olivia's breath caught almost imperceptibly. There it was. The answer she had not asked out loud. Her eyes returned to his, sharper now, more focused. "It helped," she said quietly. "Not thank you. Not yet. Just the truth." And in that small exchange, something unspoken passed between them. Not a transaction. Not a favor. Something else. Something that felt like the beginning of a story neither of them had planned to tell. Olivia Hayes held his gaze for a second longer than she intended, her mind moving quickly behind the calm expression she maintained on the surface. There was no doubt now. He was the one who had left the food. The note. The small, deliberate act that had carried more weight than it should have. And now he was standing in front of her, not distant, not hidden behind tinted glass, but present in a way that made everything feel slightly more real. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly, her voice steady but firm, not unkind, just honest. Ethan Cole nodded once, as if he had expected that response. "I know," he replied simply. No justification. No explanation. Just acknowledgement. That alone made her pause. Most people, she had learned, felt the need to explain their kindness, to attach reasons to it, to make it make sense. He did not. Noah shifted slightly beside her, his eyes moving between them with open curiosity, his small hand still wrapped around the cup of hot chocolate. "Was it you?" he asked directly, his voice soft but unfiltered in the way only a child's voice could be. Olivia instinctively glanced at him, but she did not interrupt. Ethan's expression softened just slightly as he looked down at the boy. "Yes," he said gently. "It was me." Noah nodded, as if that confirmed something important, then looked back at his cup before speaking again. "Thank you," he added, simple and sincere. Ethan gave a small nod in return. "You are welcome." The exchange was brief, but it settled something in the space between them, something quiet and genuine. Olivia exhaled slowly, her grip loosening slightly around the cup in her hands. She studied him again, more carefully this time. His clothes were understated but clearly well made. His posture relaxed but controlled. Everything about him suggested a life far removed from the one she was currently navigating. And yet, he had noticed her. That contradiction stayed with her. "Why?" she asked after a moment, her voice lower now, more thoughtful than guarded. "Why help us?" Ethan did not answer immediately. He glanced briefly around the room, taking in the quiet movement of people, the volunteers, the families, the shared space that held so many different stories at once. Then he looked back at her. "Because I saw you," he said. The words were simple, but they carried something heavier than explanation. Olivia felt that answer settle in a way she did not expect. Not because it solved anything, but because it did not try to. It did not reduce her situation to something smaller or easier to understand. It simply acknowledged it. She nodded once, slowly, as if accepting the answer for what it was. "That is rare," she said quietly. Ethan's gaze did not shift. "It should not be," he replied. A small silence followed, not uncomfortable, but full. The kind that did not need to be filled with unnecessary words. Across the room, the soft hum of voices continued, the clock ticking steadily above it all. Time moved forward, whether they were ready or not. Olivia glanced briefly at Noah, then back at Ethan. "We are not looking for handouts," she said carefully, her tone firm but not defensive. "I just need a chance to get back on my feet." Ethan nodded again, this time with a slight shift in his expression, something more focused, more deliberate. "I understand," he said. And for the first time, there was something else behind his words. Not just kindness. Intention. He reached into his coat pocket slowly, making sure the movement was visible, non-threatening, then pulled out a simple business card. He held it out toward her, but did not step closer, giving her the choice to take it or not. "If you are open to it," he said, his voice steady, "there may be a way to help with that." Olivia looked at the card but did not take it immediately. Her instincts held her back, reminding her of every situation where help had come with strings attached. Every moment where trust had been misplaced. She met his eyes again, searching for something she could believe in. "What kind of help?" she asked quietly. Ethan did not hesitate. "Work," he said. "Something temporary to start. No obligations beyond that." Olivia's breath caught just slightly, the word landing heavier than she expected. Work. Not charity. Not rescue. Something she could stand on. Her eyes dropped to the card again, then back to him. And for the first time since this conversation began, the decision in front of her did not feel like survival alone. It felt like possibility. Olivia Hayes looked at the business card in Ethan Cole's hand as if it carried more weight than paper should be allowed to hold, her instincts pulling her in two different directions at once, one urging caution, the other whispering that this might be the moment everything began to shift. She did not reach for it immediately. Instead, she studied him again, more closely now, searching for any sign of pressure, expectation, or hidden cost. She found none. That unsettled her more than anything else. Temporary, she repeated quietly, as if testing the word for meaning. Ethan nodded once. You decide how long it lasts, he said. You can walk away at any time. That detail mattered. More than he probably realized. Olivia exhaled slowly, then finally reached out and took the card, her fingers brushing the edge carefully, as if the decision itself required precision. She glanced down at it, her eyes scanning the name, the company, the simple layout that did not need to prove anything. Then she looked back up at him, her expression still guarded, but no longer closed. What kind of work? She asked again, this time with less hesitation. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, his tone remaining calm, grounded. Administrative to start, he said. Light coordination, scheduling, basic operations support. It is structured. Predictable. Something you can step into without needing time to catch up. Olivia listened carefully, each word settling into place as she measured it against her reality. Structured meant stability. Predictable meant safety. Those were things she had not had in a long time. And my son, she asked, her voice quieter now, but more direct. Ethan's gaze moved briefly to Noah, who was watching them both with quiet attention, then back to her. We can accommodate that, he said. Flexible hours. Or on-site arrangements while you get settled. We will figure out what works. The way he said it was simple, but it carried a level of certainty that felt unfamiliar. Not a promise made lightly. Not something uncertain. Something already considered. Olivia felt something shift again, deeper this time, something closer to trust but not quite there yet. She looked down at the card once more, then slipped it into her purse beside the folded napkin without fully realizing the symbolism of placing them together. One was kindness. The other was opportunity. Both had come from the same place. I will think about it, she said finally, her tone steady, her posture still firm. She would not rush this. She could not afford to. Ethan nodded, accepting that without resistance. That is all I ask, he replied. No urgency. No persuasion. Just space. Noah shifted slightly beside her, then looked up at Ethan again. Do you work there? He asked, pointing loosely in the direction of the card that had disappeared into Olivia's purse. Ethan's expression softened again, a faint hint of something almost like a smile touching the corner of his mouth. Yes, he said simply. Noah considered that for a moment, then nodded as if that explained everything. It sounds important, he added. Olivia almost smiled at that, the smallest reaction breaking through her composure before she could stop it. Ethan noticed, but did not comment on it. Instead, he stepped back slightly, giving them both space again, his presence never pushing forward, always offering room to choose. You can call anytime, he said, his voice calm, steady. Even if it is just to ask questions. Olivia nodded once, her fingers brushing lightly against her purse as if confirming the card was still there. Thank you, she said, this time allowing the words to settle fully. Not just for the food. Not just for the moment. But for the way he had approached it all. Without taking anything from her in return. Ethan inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the gratitude without making it larger than it needed to be. Then, without another word, he turned and began to walk back toward the entrance, his steps unhurried, his presence fading into the quiet rhythm of the room. Olivia watched him go for a brief moment, her mind still turning over everything that had just happened. Then she looked down at Noah, who was now finishing the last of his drink, calmer, warmer, safer than he had been the night before. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, grounding herself in the one thing she knew for certain. Whatever came next, she would choose it carefully. But for the first time in a long time, the next step did not feel like something she had to face alone. The door closed softly behind Ethan Cole, the quiet click barely noticeable against the low hum of voices inside the community center, but Olivia Hayes felt the absence of his presence almost immediately, like a shift in the air that left something behind. She sat still for a moment longer, her hand resting lightly against her purse where the business card now lay beside the folded napkin, two small pieces of paper that somehow carried more weight than anything else she owned. Noah leaned slightly into her side, his energy calmer now, his breathing even, his small world steady again for the moment. "He seems nice," Noah said softly, his voice thoughtful in a way that made Olivia glance down at him. She studied his expression, the quiet certainty in it, and felt something tighten in her chest. Children noticed things adults often tried to explain away. "He does," she replied gently, though her mind was still working through every detail, every word, every possibility that had just been placed in front of her. Across the room, a volunteer called out softly, offering sandwiches to those who had just arrived. The rhythm of the space continued, steady, practical, focused on the immediate needs of everyone inside. Olivia watched it for a moment, the quiet coordination, the way people helped without asking too many questions, the way kindness here did not come with expectations. It grounded her. But it also reminded her that this place, like all the others, had limits. Time limits. Space limits. And eventually, she would have to step back out into the uncertainty waiting beyond those doors. Her fingers brushed against her purse again, this time more deliberately. She pulled it open slowly and took out the card, holding it between her hands as she looked down at it. The name was simple. Ethan Cole. The company name beneath it carried a weight she recognized even if she could not immediately place it. Something familiar. Something larger than the room she was sitting in. She turned the card over once, as if expecting more information to appear, but it remained the same. Clean. Direct. Uncomplicated. Not like the decision it represented. "Are you going to call him?" Noah asked, his voice quiet but direct, pulling her back from her thoughts. Olivia did not answer right away. She looked at the card again, then at Noah, then back at the room around them. People resting. Waiting. Hoping. She understood that feeling too well. "I do not know yet," she said honestly. "I want to make sure it is the right step." Noah nodded, accepting that answer, though his eyes lingered on the card for a moment longer before he leaned back into his chair. Olivia slipped the card back into her purse, this time more carefully, as if placing it there was part of a decision she had not fully spoken yet. She sat back slightly, letting her shoulders relax for the first time since the conversation ended, her gaze drifting again to the clock on the wall. Time was moving. It always was. She could stay here for a little while longer. Gather her thoughts. Let the moment settle. But not forever. Her hand moved instinctively to the folded napkin, her fingers brushing over it without taking it out. "For the little fighter. Stay warm." The words echoed quietly in her mind, not as a reminder of what had been given, but of what had been seen. He had not just offered help. He had noticed. That difference mattered more than she wanted to admit. Olivia closed her eyes for a brief second, drawing in a slow breath, letting it out just as carefully. When she opened them again, her expression had shifted. Not completely. Not entirely resolved. But clearer. More focused. She turned slightly toward Noah, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We are not done yet," she said softly. "We are just getting started." And for the first time, those words did not feel like something she was forcing herself to believe. They felt like something that might actually be true. The noise of the room softened into a steady background hum as Olivia Hayes sat quietly beside Noah, her thoughts no longer scattered but beginning to take shape with a kind of quiet determination she had not felt in days. She reached into her purse again, this time with purpose, and pulled out the business card, holding it between her fingers as if it were something fragile but real. The weight of the decision in front of her had not changed, but the way she looked at it had. It was no longer just a question of risk. It was a question of direction. Noah shifted slightly beside her, his attention drifting toward a group of children now gathered around a small table, drawing with crayons provided by one of the volunteers. He glanced back at her, his expression open, trusting, the same way it had always been. "Can I go over there?" he asked softly, nodding toward the table. Olivia followed his gaze, watching the small group, the simple activity, the sense of normalcy it offered. She nodded gently. "Stay where I can see you," she said. Noah smiled faintly and slipped off his chair, moving carefully across the room, his steps light but purposeful, as if he understood that even small moments like this mattered. Olivia watched him go, her eyes lingering until he settled into a chair, a crayon already in his hand, his focus shifting into something quieter, safer. Only then did she look back down at the card. Her thumb traced the edge of it slowly, her mind moving through everything that had led to this moment. The night in the car. The cold. The uncertainty. And then the small act of kindness that had not asked for anything in return. It had not fixed everything. But it had changed something. And now this. Work. A chance. Not a promise of a perfect future, but a step forward that she could choose for herself. She took a slow breath, then reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up again, familiar, steady, waiting. Her finger hovered over the keypad for a second longer than necessary, hesitation flickering through her one last time. Then she pressed the number. The phone rang once. Twice. Each second stretching just enough to make her question the decision again. Then a voice answered. Calm. Professional. Cole Enterprises, how may I direct your call? Olivia straightened slightly in her seat, her posture shifting into something more grounded, more certain. Hello, she said, her voice steady, clear. I am calling for Ethan Cole. He asked me to reach out. There was a brief pause on the other end, the sound of typing in the background. May I ask who is calling? Olivia glanced across the room at Noah, who was now focused on his drawing, completely absorbed in the simple task. She felt something settle into place inside her, something firm, something ready. Olivia Hayes, she said. The line was quiet for a moment, then the tone shifted, just slightly. More attentive. More immediate. One moment, Ms. Hayes, the voice replied. Olivia waited, her heart steady but aware, the seconds passing with a new kind of anticipation. This was different. This was not waiting for rejection. This was waiting for a door to open. Across the room, Noah looked up briefly, his eyes finding hers, and he gave a small, reassuring smile before returning to his drawing. Olivia returned the look with a softer one of her own, then focused back on the call as the line clicked again. And in that small, quiet moment, sitting in a room that had only been meant to hold them temporarily, she realized something had already begun to change. Not because someone had saved her, but because she had chosen to step forward when the chance appeared. The line clicked softly, and then his voice came through, steady and familiar in a way that felt different now that it was no longer distant. Ethan Cole speaking. Olivia Hayes did not realize she had been holding her breath until that moment. She exhaled slowly, grounding herself before she spoke. It is Olivia, she said, her voice calm but carrying something stronger beneath it. There was no hesitation on the other end. I was hoping you would call, he replied, not surprised, not urgent, just certain in a way that made the moment feel real. Olivia glanced across the room again, her eyes finding Noah, who was now laughing quietly with another child over a drawing neither of them seemed to be taking too seriously. The sound was soft, but it carried further than anything else in the room. It reached her. It stayed with her. I am interested, she said, the words simple, but steady. In the work you mentioned. There was a brief pause, not of doubt, but of transition, like something shifting into place exactly where it was meant to go. Good, Ethan said. Then let us start with something simple. Come by the office this afternoon. We will take it one step at a time. Olivia nodded, even though he could not see it. One step at a time, she repeated quietly, as if anchoring herself to the phrase. They spoke for a few minutes longer, details that felt manageable, clear, not overwhelming. When the call ended, Olivia lowered the phone slowly, her fingers still wrapped around it as if letting go too quickly might break the moment. But it did not break. It settled. She sat there for a second, just breathing, just feeling the quiet shift that had taken place. Not a miracle. Not a sudden transformation. Just a door that had opened because she had chosen to knock. Noah looked up again, catching her expression, and he smiled without asking any questions. He did not need to. He felt it too. Olivia stood, moving toward him with a calmness that felt earned, not forced. She knelt beside him, brushing a hand lightly through his hair. We have somewhere to go this afternoon, she said softly. Noah's eyes lit up, not with excitement alone, but with something steadier. Hope that did not need to shout. Is it good? He asked. Olivia smiled, this time without holding it back. It is a start, she said. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Later, as they stepped outside, the air no longer felt as cold as it had the night before. The same streets, the same city, the same challenges waiting ahead. But something inside her had changed. Not because everything was fixed. But because she had not given up when it would have been easier to stay still. Across the street, a black SUV passed quietly, blending into traffic, its driver not stopping, not needing to. The moment had already done its work. Olivia did not look for it. She did not need to. Some kindness does not stay beside you. It moves you forward. She opened the car door for Noah, watching him climb in, then took her place behind the wheel, her hands steady, her eyes clear. The engine started again, the same sound as before, but this time it carried something different. Direction. She pulled out into the road, not faster, not louder, just certain. Because sometimes, being seen is all it takes to remember who you are. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness does not change your life in an instant. It simply reminds you that you still can. And if this story stayed with you, even for a moment, then maybe you understand what it means to be seen, to be helped, or to be the one who quietly chooses to help. And maybe, just maybe, that is where change begins.